CEO role is obviously a great role to be in. I love this role because you just have so much that you can do.
It was my first project and study, and we were going back to the hotel, and he told me that his 2-year-old kid doesn't recognize him, doesn't call him Papa.
It's a tough life. It's a high pressure job. So we said, look, the day we feel we're not enjoying, we'll move and do something else.
Here am I, a young entrepreneur, questioning the age-old education system in this country, from alt IIT to alt MBA.
If you look at some of the British stories on when they came in and they started taking control, the first thing they did was to destroy the education system, because they said if the education system is strong, then we can't control them, right? So the education system over those 100, 200 years was designed to create labor for the British Raj.
Hi, welcome to yet another episode of the CEO Diary on the Setbacks Show. On this show, I'm going to be talking to Rohit Pathak, who is the CEO of Birla Copper. Of course, he has served in McKinsey and Company as well. This entire podcast will actually show you his decision-making abilities and why did he actually was leaving McKinsey when he was almost on the verge of becoming a partner, and then went on to take a very challenging role in a heavy industry and went on to actually do a lot of interesting things such as going on ground and being involved with a lot of unions and negotiation. Watch this show till the end to know about how he took decisions, how his leadership style evolved, how he failed in life, picked himself up, and yet actually is having a very good career for not just himself, but for many families and of his employees and of the unions. If you like this podcast, of course, feel free to hit on the like button and on the subscribe button so that you get notified whenever we are bringing leaders such as Rohit Pathak on the Setbacks Show in the CEO Diary. And with that, let's get started. Good luck.
So welcome Rohit on the Setbacks Show, especially on the CEO Diary. I am very excited, and it's a personal honor to have you on the Setbacks Show, especially because you have previously been an instructor at GGI. You have supported the organization as well. Really excited to have you on the CEO Diary. Would absolutely love to hear initial remarks before we get started.
Pleasure to be here, Shadakshi, and I think it's a great initiative you guys are doing at GGI. I think it's I think giving that overview to people in the early parts of the career is a fantastic thing to do. So very happy to see what you're doing, and keep it up.
Thank you so much for such encouraging words, Rohit. So, of course, I know your journey. I have stalked you on LinkedIn and many other places before we start this podcast. But before we get started with the interview, would be absolutely helpful if you could introduce yourself in your own words, and then I'll start with the interview questions.
Sure. So, I'm an army kid, been in all parts of the country, in small towns throughout my childhood. I think it's been a fabulous childhood as a result that one got to see so much and learn so much. Did my engineering, dabbled in microprocessor design for some years, realized that's not what I enjoy doing. I'm more a people person. So I decided to switch to MBA, joined Ahmedabad and did my MBA from there. And I still couldn't decide what sector I wanted to be in, and hence chose to join McKinsey, where I was there for about 10 years. I think did all types of stuff. I think a fantastic organization, and I think the exposure I got there was really amazing. Enjoyed my time there. Then decided to move to try and build something or create something, and hence moved into the corporate world and joined Aditya Birla Group in 2011. Last 12 years, I've been here, starting with the chairman's office, where I was leading the chairman's office for a few years, and then last 7 years in operating roles as CEO first of the insulators business and now the copper business.
Oh my, I have so many intellectual curiosities from your journey, and I'm sure that so will our audience will have. Let's start from the start. My first question to you, Rohit, is going to be about your long stint at McKinsey. Why did you decide to leave it just before you were about to reach partnership or about to become a partner? It's a tough decision. I have friends who are running for that journey, and just when you were about to reach that journey, you decided to pivot. So what was going on in your mind?
The first and the most important one was, work-life balance. When Aarti and I had our second child, I realized that, I don't enjoy this, travel model where you're hardly there at home. Even if you try and squeeze in a day trip, by the time you come back, the kids are asleep. You go early in the morning. And hence I realized that this is not going to be sustainable. My elder one was 2, my younger one was just born, and until maybe a year or two before that, it was okay because you could as a EM you could take long projects, be at one location. As a AP, you were doing multiple projects, so you had to travel by definition. And I realized that, look, this is not the life we want. So we decided to call it quits. I felt I could still have survived that, but it wouldn't have been either fair for the organization because, finally, look, when you go to a client, I can't keep saying, oh, no, today I can't come because of X, Y, and Z. So it's not right for me to do that for the organization. And so that was, I think, the reason number one, that I think the work-life balance, becomes only worse as you become senior, right? Especially if you, can't travel and stay in a certain location. So I think that was the main point. Second, I think the other one, like I shared earlier, I had done, but as you advise people, the onus of the decision making is not on you, right? All advice looks great on paper. You get some feel of it when you see your clients or interact with them to see how they are faring with those suggestions that you gave. But I felt I felt like creating something or doing something which I can say, okay, this is something I did, right? And in consulting, as you know, you can't anyway talk about much of work you do. So it was sort of a secretive life, that you lead, which I was not very happy doing. So I wanted to try something else. And I think to your third point, that was also a conscious call. I realized that if I have to do something meaningful post McKinsey, if I wait to be a partner, then the options you get very restricted, right? Because you're pretty much outpriced in the market from a corporate world. Then the only real options you have is either Ps or some advisory type roles, which is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something, like I said, building a business and things like that. And I was keen on more on the manufacturing operations, the brick and mortar stuff, and not just in our days anyway. That time, the startup world wasn't very large, in those days. But even otherwise, I was more keen on the B2B manufacturing kind of stuff versus the consumer or the fintech and those kind of stuff. So I realized that if I wait for another year or so, then leaving will become tougher. I will have much lesser options, and building a career from there outside will be tougher. So that was, I think, the third reason why I left. And I think it's been a good journey since.
Got it. Spoken like a true McKinsey consultant in 3 points.
3 points, yeah. I always tried, some things don't change. For almost everything, there are 3 reasons that one can come up with.
I heard your story, and this is a very stark story that reminded me of my day one in BCG. Of course, I'll not take the name of the principal. It was my first project and study. And we were going back to the hotel, and he told me that his 2-year-old kid doesn't recognize him, doesn't call him Papa. And I was shocked listening to that. And later on, of course, I found that he left after 7 months. I think he realized, and I think the answer may differ. There are people who pick up that partnership route. It may work for few and it may not. And there is another thing. There is a very famous Sachin Tendulkar clip when he was 16-year-old, and he was asked for advisory for the next generation. And he said, be true to yourself. So what, Rohit, I think you are saying is about being true to yourself. What do you want and what do you not want?
Yes.
With that, yes.
And I think I wouldn't just say true to myself, but I think true to ourselves as a family, because I think we as a family are a unit. And when I joined, I joined McKinsey early. So when we married, Aarti and I had made a pact that, look, if 5-6 months we have a life which we're not enjoying, I'll switch, because we knew what McKinsey entails, and it's a tough life. It's a high pressure job. So we said, look, The day we feel we're not enjoying, we'll move and do something else.
I love that choice of word enjoy. So few people can and few people not. With that, Rohit, I would also want to pick up your brains on the learnings that you took away from McKinsey that were transferable, for example, to your role.
So I think since I'm talking of learnings from McKinsey, let me talk about 3 learnings from McKinsey. I think the first is being able to understand an industry quickly, right? I think it trains you phenomenally to look at any industry within a very short time and know what it's about. So within a week, you know exactly what the key points to look at for industry are. And I think that's something which has really helped me post McKinsey. It's something which is now I think in your DNA, right? So I have no fear of looking at a new industry or moving to a new industry. Even after when I moved to ABG, it was a completely new business for me. I'd never been or never worked with ABG in my consulting career. The 2 businesses I've headed after that are both businesses which I didn't know much of before I joined. But I never had any anxiety around that because I knew I'll figure out what the sector or industry is about. The second is, I think, interacting with people. The exposure you get in terms of interacting with clients, all different types of people, entrepreneurs, leaders, managers, frontline guys. I think it was a fantastic one, and I did a lot of operations work. So I did spend a lot of time on the ground with operating teams, and hence I think the people skills quite well honed for that phase in my career, which was the second I think key learning. And I think third, I would say is just that confidence that you can handle anything, right? You are tuned to say, you can get any problem solved. And that I think was a very important learning to get.
Got it. So is there element of lack of skin in the game in the consulting game? And there is more in the current role that you have or the other roles that you have had?
I don't think it's a lack of skill, lack of stay. Because frankly, yes, in consulting, if you have to build your consulting career, you have to stick on with the client for a bit longer. So yeah, you do have a stake, but you're still a third party. The decision being taken is by a client of yours. Yes, you try your best, but you don't have to go through as much of a turmoil of trading off the negatives of a decision. Tend to look at it a lot more from a puristic point of view versus a practical point of view. As simple as saying, look, if you have to fire someone in McKinsey or a consulting companies, it's part of the way the firm works. When you're working in a corporate, you're saying, oh, this person has given 20 years of his or her life. He or she stood by the company in tough times. Should you give the person another chance? A real dilemma. In consulting, you would just say, look, not right. The person needs to go, right? Yes, you'll give a good severance package and X, Y, and Z, but you don't live with that. I would say that dilemma of, oh, should I or should I not, right? Whereas in corporate world, you need to think that through.
Got it. With that, I would want to now move towards your leadership roles and CEO roles and try to better understand how have you taken decisions. So right off the bat, Rohit, in your current role as a CEO, what do you think is the biggest challenge that you have faced? What was it and how did you overcome it?
So look, I think to me, if I look at the 2 operating roles I've done over the last 7 years, first with the insulator business, now with the copper business. So I wouldn't say there's any one challenge which is so large, right? But I think there are multiple things that you need to work on. So for example, when I moved to insulators, one of the things which I would say a bit nervous on was how would I handle the union negotiations, right? We had 2 plants, one in Gujarat, one in Bengal. Both of them had very strong unions. It was a very manpower intensive business, 1,000 plus people in each of the plants. In Calcutta, we had 6 unions, right? And, I had only seen unions in movies, and, I sort of had those vague images of what they stand for.
I have seen them in movies only till now.
Right. So, when those negotiations came out, and you had to do the LTS negotiation for the next 5 years, and I think it was a little bit daunting to see given I had no prior experience on how that would go. I would say, one, I had a great team. Second, we did a lot of good things to build the trust. And, was something that seemed initially a bit, I would say, scary in the role, turned out to be actually something that I enjoyed doing. Right? And I felt we made a difference on. The second, typically, I would say from a challenge perspective, is how do you drive for growth, right? Because as a CEO, that is one of your core KRAs of can you take the business to the next level, right? And how do you define that? How convinced are you? Because finally, someone has to take a call, and the chairman or the board depends on your gut feel. So the onus of that growth is very high, or that decision is very highly focused on you and your own gut, right? You can swing it a lot depending on how you think. So I would say that has always been a bit of a challenge to say, look, are you doing the right thing? Are you biting too much? Are you biting too little? Are you not doing enough? Right? I think those dilemmas that go on in the mind are something which is a little tougher to handle, and it takes a bit getting used to as you get started in that role.
Got it. I would want to just double click on the negotiation part because it sounds very interesting. So, Rohit, typically as a CEO, do you have a choice to be on the front end, become part of a conversation, or could you shy away from it? What kind of choices do you have when you're dealing with unions like this?
No, so look, as typically in the HR team or the unit team takes charge. I was not in the front, but I think one of the reasons why I chose to move to insulators when I did after my role with the chairman office was that I felt I had never done anything operational, and this was a business which was a bit as old school as it gets from what it did from a manufacturing location. It was a manual. A highly manual intensive manufacturing process, unions, government engagement, business development, everything you wanted to learn was there in that business. And it was still a business which is not too large in the group. So, I said, look, if I have to try things differently, it's probably the best place to go to, because if I do something wrong, the damage won't be too much on the group side, right? So I could try, and I would get a lot more, I would say, flexibility to try different things. So I think when I moved into this role over the first year, I was very keen to try a very different way of leadership, where I said, look, if everyone feels engaged in the company, from the workers to me, then things will automatically work fine. So we spent a lot of time along with my leadership team in the first year of my taking over to build the frontline correct. So ensuring that the workers have a good working environment, that we are very conscious on the safety on the front line, because it's a ceramic business predominantly. There's a lot of dust on the floor. So can we keep that off? Are people wearing the right mask? Is the food and the canteen food right? Is it, so we sort of, for example, ensured that the food across the organization, whether it's a worker or a management, is the same. The canteen is the same. We all ate in the same place. We cleaned up and renovated all the, washrooms across the plant. So we did a lot of things to build trust. And my basic thesis was that, unions have their power because sometimes you as management don't listen to the workers. But if you break that and say, okay, if a worker has an issue, he can come straight to you, and that barrier is broken, then frankly, union negotiation is not a big deal, right? Because you're already doing stuff the workers want and they're happy with. So I think once we broke that initial barrier, and I was on the shop floor whenever I went there, I would talk to everyone, and that just changed the whole, I would say, culture at both the plants, and very smooth, collaborative negotiation. In fact, in both of them, we never even discussed on the charter of demands that the union would submit. Normally that's how it works. The union will give a charter of demands, then you give a charter of demands, then you negotiate on that. We never went into that at all in both those plans. We just shared, this is what the company is doing. This is what we expect. If we all do this, this is what we can get. and let's discuss around that. And that was all our discussion that happened, right? And I think people were quite happy with how that went, and a very motivated team I had.
Got it. It sounds like a movie scene. And I would just want to double click on one more thing. Rohit, at the position where you stand right now, there are very few people who get to impact people literally at the ground level. You're dealing with unions, they have children, they might have families who are not even educated or educated. Has that changed you as a person? How a lot of people look up to you or have trust in your organization as a CEO? Has that changed you emotionally, not emotionally? Or it's fine if it has not changed you, but just trying to understand. It's a very unique position because you're dealing in a very heavy industry.
Fortunately, I think one of the impacts of my childhood being in the defense, was this, that, I saw my father and his colleagues and mother spend so much of time with the soldiers, the camaraderie that you saw. Yes, there's a strong hierarchy in the army, but I think the camaraderie and the mutual support that people give is unparalleled. That is why the Indian soldier today is still probably one of the best soldiers you'll find anywhere in the world, because the officer genuinely is concerned about each of their workers. So I think to date, some of the soldiers who worked with us, with my father, with my grandfather, as families, we are in touch with them. Right? We've helped their kids. They reach out when they need help, and you're there for them. So I think that DNA has been there, I would say, in me, and hence I think it's a privilege to be able to change lives. Like I said, the one decision which I do struggle with is, how do you decide if you have to really fire someone, right? And where is it that you take that call? Because yes, that can have an impact on their family lives and their children and their future, right? So have you given sufficient chance? Have you supported them enough? Is something that, yes, worries you from quite often, if in this role.
I can totally imagine that I am playing a very mini role to what you are doing, of course, and at a very young age. Those are the hardest things that, of course, I have also done, and I'm still in the process of learning, which brings me towards my next natural extension towards fostering strong culture in your organization. So coming from defense background, the way it has shaped you, dealing with unions and the stress of it, having that McKinsey pedigree and that background as well, what kind of culture do you like to have in your organization, and what kind of initiatives have you taken to form that strong camaraderie in your organization as well?
So I think what we're trying to do are a few things differently. Typically in an organization, you're used to saying there's a top-down hierarchy, right? Which is saying the CEO, and then there are functional heads, and then there are the managers, and then the workers. And the first thing we're trying to change is to flip this around and say there's the organization is like this, right? The front line is at the top. They are the ones who are actually doing all the work, and the role of the rest of the team, right up to me, is to ensure that we create an environment where the front line can do their best, because finally they are the ones who are creating whatever product we are selling. They are selling to the customer what we make, right? And hence they have to be able to do their best, right? The role of the management and leadership is to ensure that when they go out to do what needs to be done, they do it safely. They are engaged, they are committed, and they think for the organization in the right way, right? So that is, I think, in essence, what we're trying to change. So from the typical top-down structure that one is used to seeing, if you look at any MBA school, any HR school, they'll always start seeing organization is like that, and that's just the training that you have gone through. Whereas actually, I think it is a bit like this. Right? And that changes the way you think and the way you act. The hierarchy, in my view, is only for decision making, because yes, someone has to take a decision and take the accountability for that decision, right? So yes, you need a hierarchy, you need a manager and a CEO to take decisions when there is a conflict or trade-off to be made. But for everything else, the organization is like this. I think the second one is, to me, you have to change the psyche of organization is meant to only take orders from the top, which was fine at some point in the early phases of any organization. But if you do that for too long, the employees lose the interest or will or even the capability to do things on their own or think on their own, right? Because you're used to just following an order. So, please tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? So, which means you're not using the brain power of most of the organization. So, like in McKinsey, we used to say, yes, we are great problem solvers, but your job is not to solve the problem. Your job is to get the problem solved, right? And I think it's a subtle difference in words, but a big difference in how it plays on the ground. So if I suddenly start saying, okay, my job is here to get the problem solved and not solve the problem, it takes away a lot of burden from my head. Second, I put a lot of onus on my team members and their capability and their experience. So think about it in an organization. If 4,000 of my employees think for the organization versus only me thinking for the organization, which will be a better outcome. Obviously, when 4,000 people are thinking for the betterment of the organization. Right. So that is, I think, the second big change that we're trying to do, that everyone should feel empowered, that they are doing something meaningful, that they're deciding, and if others are here to guide, support, decide. But, everyone has to think about what they can do differently, how they can improve what they do. So, and the third one, I think, to me, which is also very important, and most of us end up spending 8, 10, 12 hours at work, which is more than the uptime you have at home, right? Almost twice the uptime that you'll have at home. So you should have fun in those 8, 10 hours. You should enjoy what you're doing, right? You should have an environment where people enjoy being with each other, right? The team spirit is there. Yes, you'll handle tough things. Manufacturing is a tough place to be at. But, if you can make it fun, you can make it enjoyable, then you'll get a lot more from the team, right? So I think these three things, from top down to thinking of it as a reverse, organization, getting everyone to think and apply their minds, and to ensure that people have fun and enjoy what they're doing.
It's such an interesting answer for the first one. I'm also reminiscing or thinking, what if the government starts thinking around those lines? Many people have, at least to my mind, have misperceived conceptions when they, for example, apply for IAS officers, IPS officers. They are government servant. That may mean that you're at the top, but you're reporting to the people at the bottom by the virtue of the name servant. And what if the government starts thinking that it's an inward pyramid? I really liked your second advice, because as a young entrepreneur, I at times take that burden of solving everything myself, thinking I'm the problem solver. So I really like your advice on don't solve the problem, but get it solved. With that, Rohit, I would want to swiftly pivot and now understand your rich perspective at a macro India level. As the CEO of a large corporate organization, I am sure that there is a lot of things that we can learn from you at an industry and at a topical level. Starting right off the bat, my passionate topic about education ecosystem. Here am I, a young entrepreneur, questioning the age-old education system in this country, from alt IIT to alt MBA. You have gone to BITS, you have been to IIM as well. What are your perspectives on what are certain good things that our country is doing for education, and what could be few things that our country could improvise upon when it comes to education system itself?
So look, our education system is a very rigorous education system. I think in simplistic terms, what you get from that system is people who are academically very brilliant, willing to work hard. I think what it doesn't do enough of is give that leeway of thinking differently, thinking entrepreneurially, right? Because you're used to saying, look, this is the way to go for it. So today, if you look at, our times, we are still lucky that, let's say the BITS or IIT and some of the good engineering colleges didn't have that strong coaching system, right? Today, it's like, if you want to get into an IIT, you then just start your JEE preparation from 8th and just do that, right? And that's how it works, because that's a change. So, we have one of the best doctors in the world. We have some of the best doctors, we have some of the best engineers, right? I think that that worked very well for a certain phase to get us to a certain level. Now, if you look at the next 15, 20, 30 years, where you have to be a leader as a nation, right? I think the next 20, 30 years, India will emerge as the top two economies. Will overtake US for sure in the next 20, 25 years as an economy. So, you are now no longer trying to follow someone and say, this is what I need to do, right? You need to create your own path. And for that, you need people who will think, who will experiment, and who will create new opportunities. And for that, hence, your education system needs to change. And I think already, if I look at, a lot of my friends and colleagues from, McKinsey and other such organizations, and even from the corporate, are setting up universities in India which are going to be very different, on how they operate, right? If I look at some of the schools that are coming up, they are now doing things very differently. And it's actually a bit ironical that, the core ancient Indian education system was of that type, right? If you look at the Gurukul system that we had centuries ago, it was one of the best education systems which gave you holistic learning about everything. And then you could choose what you want to be. Somewhere in the British rule, it got destroyed. And, if you look at some of the, my wife does a lot of research and reads up a lot about history. And, if you look at some of the British stories on when they came in and they started taking control, the first thing they did was to destroy the education system, because they said if the education system is strong, then we can't control them, right? So the education system over those 100, 200 years was designed to create labor for the British Raj. And unfortunately, we continued with that for quite some years. It helped us. I'm not saying it was bad, but I think it's time to change. And I think if I look at some of the key design principles of the new education policy, it is trying to bring back that entrepreneurial nature of what we need to do. And for a country our size, we need all types, right? Yes, you will need some of this mass scale talent creation pool, but you also need entrepreneurial pool to be created.
I love that answer, Rohit, especially because you broke down history into phases. And I was thinking of marvels such as Nalanda University and many other examples where we were the leader in education space. So perhaps we could learn a little bit from our history. And you're bang on right. In the British era, or in fact later, and also we wanted a workforce. Now we just don't want a workforce. We want much more than that itself. My next question, Rohit, is about your learning and professional development. You are living such a busy life. People report it to you. You are trying to be ahead of the trends as well, I suppose so. How do you take out time? What are your resources through which you professionally develop yourself and stay ahead of the trends that are going on in your market and beyond as well?
In my role, my job is to ensure I steer the ship in the right direction. So if I'm busy trying to row the boat, I will miss where we are going. Right? So I am very conscious of the fact that my job is to look at my team, figure out where there could be weaknesses or where there could be something happening, look at the surroundings, look at the environment, so that I can guide the ship well, right? And I very passionately stay away from trying to do any rowing myself. So I think my focus generally, or I spend a lot of time talking and interacting with people from different walks of life. So for example, one of the things that I do, which I had probably started in my introduction, is I today am the president of the Indian Electrical and Electronics Manufacturers Association, which is the parent organization for all electrical staff in the country. It's one of the oldest associations of the country. I'd started participating in that when I joined Insulators, and as luck would have it, it's helped me in copper too, because all my customers and network partners are all from EMA. So I spend a lot of time in the industry trying to talk to people and figure out what's happening, right? Second, I spend a lot of time with different people in the organization, in different cohorts, every month, to just hear them out what's happening inside regularly, right? So whenever I'm going to my plant tomorrow, I have a session in a small group with people who have been stuck in the same role for a long time. I'm having a session with people, some of the youngsters who have just joined in the last 1 or 2 years. I'm having a session with some of the women leaders we have in our plant. So, I try and do small different types of cohorts to just listen to them and understand how their experiences, how they see what's happening in the organization. And third, I keep a keen eye on interacting with youngsters. So one of the reasons while people may attribute different reasons for my being on LinkedIn, one of the core reasons why I became active on LinkedIn was just to connect with the young generation to figure out what's on their mind, right? How are they thinking about what's happening? Because I realized that in the next 20 years, the economy will be led by what kind of decisions they take, because they are going to be your big consumer class, right, for every business. So how they think, how they decide is a very important part, and I need to learn that. Otherwise, I will be, leading the organization with some ancient knowledge. Right, so I spend a lot of time consciously with youngsters to just understand how they're thinking, what they're doing, and I think that is, to me, at least my way of learning. I'm very bad at reading, so I don't read much. I think that's one weakness or gap I've had always. That I don't think I would at best read one book in a year. That's the max I can get to, and that also if it's really exciting or interesting. I think the advantage of that, though, is that you can think, you're not constrained by someone else's thoughts. You can build your own thoughts, which I do a lot more actively.
Sure. It sounds as a very pretty answer, because you're really learning from people around, and now I can connect the dots, because you're many times curious about, hey, what's going in your life, how are you doing? So I now can think that Rohit is trying to perhaps learn how a young entrepreneur, female entrepreneur, is thinking and behaving. Rohit, as we almost move towards the end of this CEO diary, I would want to perhaps ask you a hard question about personal setbacks. When someone may look at your profile or your journey, it seems all impeccable. You have tick mark all the check boxes from academia to professional experiences level. But someone who is perhaps 20, who is going to look at this podcast with twinkle in his or her eyes, could you share any potential setback that you faced in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Sure. So, I'll share a few things around that. So, one is, unlike many people, I've never really had a clear idea of what I wanted to do in terms of my professional career. So I never had industry preference. I didn't have a functional preference. All I knew was I don't want to be in finance. That I think I was very clear on. But beyond that, I was, generally very, very flexible. So I think as a result, my only objective was do something well. Because of that, if I look at, all the roles, and I've, as you could see in my profile, I've not changed too many. I've only changed companies once, from McKinsey to ABG. That's the only change I've taken. And in ABG, I've made 2 or 3 shifts in terms of, the roles now I'm doing. But, if I now step back and say, if a year before I made that switch, you had asked me what I would be doing next, I would never be able to tell you, right? Or what I would have told you what I'm doing, it would have been completely off the mark. But what I focused on is, am I building skills as I went forward? So that's been generally my career philosophy. So yes, I think from outside it looks like Bates, I am McKinsey CEO, but actually the journey didn't happen like that, right? Things fell in place, but it was not planned in this way. Second, I think one of the first failures I had, which did impact me a bit, I would say, was when I was doing my 12th. In our times, 12th marks did count, so 12th was an important exam. But as I said, I was an army kid. All my friends were trying for defense. I also sat through the NDA exam. Exam obviously I cleared. I was a good student, so exam was not a problem. I went for the SSB, and I think it went well. The physical and all I did well, but I didn't get shortlisted for NDA, and this was just a month and a half before my boards. So yes, NDA was not my first choice per se, but I was definitely keen because I did feel army and defense was a good career. I was a good student, so I was from the defense background and not making it, which I thought would be a straightforward thing because I was physically fit, I was intelligent, and an army kid. With those three, if I can't make it, then I felt bad. But yeah, my father, obviously counseled me a bit, and I took it my stride. Did well in 12th, but it was not until I think almost a decade later when I, in fact, he didn't tell me. He told my wife, who told me even many years later, was that my father was equally hit with saying, why did he not make it through an NDA? Though he was not keen that I join in army, but he was curious. So as it happened, he met with the one of the guys who was his colleagues who was heading the center I had gone to for my interview, and he says, look, just for my curiosity, can you just figure out in his records what happened, right? Why was he not selected? And that person came back and told Dad that, look, he had passed everything, right? And there was only one remark which the psychologist had put in, which was saying, look, he's too sharp for the army. He will feel claustrophobic and get constrained. So we should not take him. And that was the reason why I didn't get selected. So, I think to me, the lesson is, look, everyone has setbacks. I've also had my share in corporate world. Also, there are decisions which I've taken which have not worked well. But the only thing that matters is, one, did you try your best? Right? If you tried your best, it's okay. No one has a perfect 10 on 10 on all decisions you take. So it's okay. You will have failures. And I think Mrs. Birla, I heard her say in one of her talks that, look, failure or fail is the first attempt in learning. As long as you are, learning from it, it's fine. So I think I've learned to take some of these things in my stride. Yes, I've had quite a few challenges or things that didn't work out as per plan, both professionally as well as in personal life. But that happens. I think you see the things around you. There's so much that you have been given. Feel good for that and move on.
Wow, what a life would have been for you had you cleared NDA. Completely different path.
Yes.
I'm almost at the end of this Shatakshi show, especially for the CEO diary. Rohit, before we wrap up, would absolutely love if you would want to have last words of advice for aspiring CEOs. They could be for their startups, they could be for the corporates as well. So what would be your last words of leadership and advice for young entrepreneurs and young CEOs?
So look, I think the CEO role is obviously a great role to be in. I have no second thought that I love this role because you just have so much that you can do, right? But I think the trappings of the CEO role are equally high. I think, can you stay humble? I've worked with Mr. Birla closely in my journey at ABG, and if there's one thing I learned from him is just to be humble, right? You can't find an industrialist who's as big as him, but not once in my interaction the last 10, 12 years, I've, seen him throw his weight around, right, in terms of how he interacts. So I think one, don't let the role get to you in what you've become. I think second, stay curious, listen to people. Yes, you will decide what needs to be done. But you don't have to rush into saying, okay, I'm giving the answer, figure out from others. Third, if you've taken a wrong call, admit it and move on, right? It's okay, mistakes happen, right? So I don't hesitate if I've taken some decision, someone else came up with some new information and I know my decision was wrong. I'm okay saying my decision was wrong, let's change it, right? And fourth, I would say is, look, and I shared in one of my LinkedIn posts a few months ago that, the CEO doesn't stand for Chief Executive Officer. In today's world, it stands for Chief Empowerment Officer. It stands for Chief Enablement Officer. It stands for Chief Empathetic Officer, right? Because I think these are the things that you as a CEO have to do. You have to show that you care for your team, and that you're empathetic, you're empowering them and enabling them to do their best. That's your role.
Oh my, such a great way of wrapping up this podcast. Here's to being humble, here's to empowering others, and here's to being curious throughout your life. Thank you so much, Rohit, for such an enriching and motivational pod for our audience. Thank you so much once again for your time.
Pleasure talking to you, Sadakshi.